Two genetic freaks who were ring-mad geniuses, the Steiner brothers deserve our attention. They sparked heated debate, were fierce, and provided hours of enjoyable entertainment. If you're unfamiliar with the Steiner brothers, you've been missing out on some of the wildest, most exciting tag team matches ever witnessed in a wrestling ring. The real-life brothers Rick and Scott Steiner, who had legitimate amateur wrestling histories, added a fresh dimension of ferocity to the ring. It was like these guys were superhuman. Rick and Scott used to be University of Michigan mat warriors before they started hurling men around like rag dolls in WCW and WWF. American wrestlers were all of them. These individuals were authentic. They had a leg up in the sport that few other wrestlers could equal thanks to their amateur background. Among their many accomplishments in WCW was a string of WCW World Tag Team Championships. Their careers have been full with controversy, disputes, and even a dramatic breakup between the two brothers, but that hasn't stopped them from succeeding. Their wrestling style is the first thing we should discuss. Scott and Rick weren't merely competent, those were powerful. Their techniques were so strong and forceful that it was impossible not to grimace in response. But there were instances when they went a little bit overboard. Stiffness, defined as striking harder or rougher than required, is something that their fellow wrestlers would say they were. For some, it seemed as though the harm was intentional. Such antics spread beyond the confines of the ring. Disputes and sometimes physical altercations broke out behind the scenes as a result. A wild story recounts a battle that broke out backstage during Scott Steiner and Sid Vicious's stint in WCW. They were both hurt because things escalated so quickly. They carried the same level of intensity from the ring into everyday life. The drama, however, continues, particularly in regards to Scott Steiner. Every aspect of Scott's being grew exponentially larger as he assumed the character of Big Papa Pump. Unpredictable, boisterous, and a real handful, he was. He gained notoriety for his notorious promos, in which wrestlers addressed the audience or their opponents. In Scott's speeches, he would just state his opinions without regard to context. It made a lot of people mad at times, but it was also funny and shocking at other times. Whatever it took, Scott was not afraid to speak his mind, whether it was about his employer, other wrestlers, or management. Although his fans adored his uncensored and genuine performances, it caused numerous problems behind the scenes. A lot of connections were damaged because people didn't always want to be a part of Scott's mayhem. However, wrestling was only one of several disagreements between the Steiner brothers. They got themselves into some legal issues in 1998 as a result of a road rage incident. This further solidified their reputation as controversial individuals, which fans often misunderstood, and added to their ever-expanding record of scandals. Finally, things came to a close. Still, Rick and Scott made a fantastic tag team despite everything. However, their partnership started to evolve as they progressed in their careers. Soaring to fame as a solo artist was a watershed moment for Scott. Big Papa Pump thrust himself into the limelight, pushing Rick to the sidelines. Their tag team dynamic began to take a back seat as WCW promoted Scott as a potential main event contender. Their relationship also appeared to be impacted by this change, which occurred both professionally and personally. Scott and Rick couldn't have been more dissimilar. In contrast to Scott's outspoken and gregarious attitude, Rick was more introverted and quiet. Their disagreements appeared to drive a wedge between them as time went on. What felt like a representation of real-life conflicts on television occurred when Scott betrayed Rick during a WCW storyline. There were whispers that the Steiner brothers weren't even on good terms after their breakup, and they certainly weren't working together very much. They appeared to have severed all ties as brothers for a long time. It was a tragic turn of affairs for the two men who had shared so much success and had been so close. However, a happy ending was finally found, as is the case with many wrestling stories. After being apart for a long time, Rick and Scott made up. As if to prove that distance can mend fences, they reconciled and worked together again as a tag team later in their careers. Seeing them together brought back all the feelings that people had for them when they were younger. Despite everything they had been through, they still had the ability to captivate an audience and collaborate as effortlessly as before. A wild ride awaits you in the tale of the Steiner brothers. As a tag team, they revolutionized the sport with their strength and inventiveness, and they were two of the most gifted wrestlers of their time. However, their careers are rife with controversy, conflict, and times that put their brotherly love to the test. The conclusion, though, is arguably the most crucial aspect of their story. As Rick and Scott's reconciliation shows, it's possible to mend even the most broken relationships. Indeed, nothing is more important than family, and the Steiner brothers demonstrated that their bond could withstand the extreme conditions of professional wrestling. Here is a brief biography of each of the actual ones, covering their life and work. The wrestling duo of Rick and Scott Steiner didn't always have their current level of success. They were born into a family of two brothers in Bay City, Michigan, and they quickly discovered their innate athletic abilities. They were very involved in athletics, especially wrestling, where they achieved great success. The eldest brother, Rick, was the first to achieve significant success in the wrestling industry. When he was a student at Michigan, he was a dominant wrestler. An incredible feat in amateur wrestling, he was named to the All-American team in 1983. As a professional wrestler, Rick became known for his explosive and forceful style. The younger of the two brothers, Scott, was not far behind. While at the University of Michigan, he wrestled as well and proved to be just as talented and motivated as his older brother. When it came to wrestling, the Reichsteiner boys, that's their actual last name, were absolute pros. It was inevitable that they would eventually reach a new degree of proficiency. The first to make the jump to professional wrestling was Rick, who made his debut in 1983. His unique qualities were obvious to everyone who encountered him. His unique background in amateur wrestling really shone through when he entered the ring. He possessed an undeniable energy, was very competent, and was tough as nails. A few years down the road, in 1986, Scott made his debut. As soon as they joined forces, their enchantment became apparent. In the late 1980s, the Steiner brothers formally joined forces as a tag team, and they wasted no time making an impression. When compared to other tag teams of the day, they stood out. The athleticism, technical prowess, and raw power of Rick and Scott were unparalleled. With movements like his classic Frankensteiner, Scott displayed an unusual degree of agility for a man of his stature. People really loved it. Contrarily, Rick embodied energy and brute strength. They could do anything as a team. They became one of the best tag teams in the late 80s and early 90s after breaking through in World Championship Wrestling, or WCW. They were unstoppable, winning championship after championship while entertaining spectators with unforgettable contests. It was essential to keep an eye on the Steiner brothers since they were excellent. However, their influence extended beyond WCW. New Japan Pro Wrestling was another arena where the Steiners achieved stardom. Wrestling in Japan was a breeze for the Steiners because of the admiration of spectators there for their combination of physical prowess and technical expertise. In the early 1990s, they also had a notable encounter with WWE, which was once known as WWF. Their brief tenure with WWE did not diminish the impact they had on tag team fans. It was a major event when they left WCW. The Steiner brothers' run as a tag team came to an end when Scott betrayed Rick in the middle of a storyline. Even while it was shocking to fans, it seemed like a natural progression for their careers at the time. Regrettably, the on-screen treachery mirrored several real-life conflicts between the two brothers. Their relationship appeared to be troubled for quite some time, on both a professional and personal level. It seemed like the Steiner brothers were finished, both as a tag team and as brothers, for a long time. They seldom made public appearances together, and rumors circulated that they had an argument. Their longtime fans were left to wonder if Rick and Scott would ever reconcile after witnessing their dominance in the ring. As luck would have it, the passage of time can mend broken hearts. Rick and Scott got back together after being apart for a long time. Later in their careers, they made a couple tag team performances together, which brought back fond memories for fans. Witnessing their rekindled collaboration served as a poignant reminder of the exceptional partnership they formed. So, have they disappeared? Rick and Scott are no longer actively involved in the wrestling industry. Special appearances by Scott do occur from time to time, either on the indie circuit or in promotions such as Impact Wrestling. His enormous charisma continues to captivate audiences even as he enters his sixth decade of life. In retirement, Rick has chosen a more sedate path.